Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nicole Morgan, and I am an associate attorney at RAICES, and I will be serving as your moderator for this very important live stream about Title 42 and its disproportionate adverse effect on Black immigrants that are subjected to it. I know that the Supreme Court today struck a decisive blow to the Migrant Protection Protocol, also known as MPP, and the Remain in Mexico policy, which is a great victory for the immigrant justice movement. However, I think it needs to be made clear that the people who were subjected to MPP were allowed to enroll because they could not be expelled under Title 42. Title 42 is a danger to immigrants and forcing them to stay in Mexico. Just to give a quick refresher on Title 42, Title 42 was a Trump era policy that is rooted in white supremacy under the guise of public health. That basically allows CBP officers to look at brown and Black immigrants and call them disease on sight and expel them to their home country with no process, which is something that the Biden administration unfortunately adopted and continued. We in the advocate community have raised the alarm about T42 and its roots in white supremacy and the deprivation of Black and brown people to asylum. We shine the brightest light that we could on the bigotry of the implementation of Title 42 when the people of Ukraine came to the southern border in mass numbers and were greeted and escorted into the United States, not subject to Title 42 or expedited removal, which requires detention. We have written detailed reports describing in graphic detail the violence and death of many immigrants that are subjected to Title 42, and disproportionately those people affected are Black immigrants. But for all of our outcry, for all of the reports, our lawmakers decided to try to make T42 a permanent law of the land. So what's the current effect of Title 42? We had 53 Central Americans found dead in the back of a truck. We have had over 100 Haitians, mostly women and children, drown when their boats capsized trying to make it to Puerto Rico. And we still have Black immigrants being subjected to violence and death in Mexico because of this policy. So against the backdrop of Juneteenth and Pride Month, which are celebrations of hard-fought right to live freely and fearlessly. But we cannot forget about the struggle for equality. And so today we're giving the microphone and bullhorn to Black immigrants themselves to tell you in their words what Title 42 is and has done for them and to them as Black immigrants. We are hoping that you do more than just see them, but hear them and hear what Title 42 actually does to people who are just seeking to live freely in the United States, free from fear. And so with that, I would like to introduce John, who will tell you his story as a Title 42 survivor. John?
I'm saying hello to everyone who is connected right now, wherever you are. It's a pleasure to connect with you. Like you all see it, I am John. And for me to talk about the effects of the Title 42, what it brought to the community of Black immigrants, especially in Mexico, we can see that it brought a lot of problems in the community. We can see that Title 42, even though it's a law that is about public health and that was established in Trump's government, that a lot of immigrants are trying to find a way to help themselves by throwing themselves in the water, where a lot of them died, and also in their work, a lot of them lost their work. even their home, even to pay rent. They lost their jobs because of the Title 42. They had to stay in Mexico, and the company or everybody in this time, they lost their job, and the Black community, they lost their jobs. So this permitted this caused a lot of immigrants to sleep in the streets, and they were subjected to sexual abuse. They got robbed. Some of them got shot. They died. So this is a problem. This is one of the problems that it caused. These are problems that it caused in Mexico and the Black community. This Title 42. I don't know if someone is interpreting for me. I'm hoping I'm not going too fast. I don't know if you can hear me. Oui, nous qu'attendons.
Ok, très bien, très bien. Donc, c'est Jean,
Yes, so it's just for me a way to say that uh, the the goal of the Black immigrants is to cross and go look for a better life in the United States. So when you get to the border with Mexico, they know that the Title 42 law, immediately that they go across the border, the ones that are they are submitted to deportation, they get sent back to Haiti. And when you know that this country is not, there's no security, some of them die, some of them get kidnapped, some of them they get raped. Me personally, I met a lot of women that when they came, because of the Title 42, they were deported, and when they got there, they were kidnapped, and they were some of them were raped by 7 people, 7 men, and that created a big disaster. And you can see in Mexico, the Title 42, it allowed especially the Black immigrants, they were subjected to a lot of stuff that didn't make sense. For example, you can see in the time, like in the COVID crisis, during the COVID crisis, because it was in this time that they invented the Title 42. And all the white, all the Mexicans, they were walking around with the mask, with their mask. And if the Haitians wear the mask, it's a problem. It's like they don't want to see us. They get mistreated immediately when they see them. The Black people are a problem. There's a lot of racism. The Black people don't have access to health, to hospitals. Like if I go to the regulation or human rights, whichever human being that gets to a country, they are allowed to healthcare. But when it comes to the Black immigrants, when they go to the hospital, like there's a social number that they give them. So because they don't have the social number, they don't benefit from healthcare. So these people, they lose their lives. A lot of them, a lot of women or young women that are pregnant, when they go to the hospital to give birth, or to give life to that child, they when they go, they have the child, and some doctors put something in their uterus for them to not be able to have more children. So a lot of them, they keep bleeding. So a lot of them, they have to get surgery and spend a lot of pesos in the hospital. So we think this is a lot of injustice and abuse that the Black community and Haitian community were subjected to. A lot of them, some of them, they cannot work, so they cannot talk about their rights. They don't have any money. Some of them, they call me, and I try to see how I can find a lawyer for them. And these same lawyers, they don't accept certain things. So all of this happens, and we cannot say anything. Even the police stopped me twice already. They took my money. They told me that they are in and they were the public. So they stop my car, they hold my car. I tell them that I have my license, I have my driver's license, and they were the one who gave it to me. And they're like, oh, this license is no good. If you don't want to lose this car, give me that amount of money. And then they're like, what do you mean, man? I'm like, what do you mean money? And they ask me how much I have. So I have to give them whatever I have, whatever money I have. So the justice for Black immigrants is very difficult. I'm not saying it's impossible, but if a group of people, a group in a solid organization, just like I used to represent Haitian Bridge Alliance in Tijuana, Mexico. So we used to report all of this, all of these things, all of these abuse, all of this sexual abuse. Like, and then we also had like kidnapping in Mexico. When they see the people, the Black people, they beat them, they kidnap them. And so I was in a university. To tell you, the Black people, it's like we don't have any value when it comes to other nations. So they degrade us a lot as Black people. They ask us what we come to do here. What are you doing here? Go back to your country. So we are always subjected to humiliation. I remember I was talking to a girl and she was telling me with tears in her eyes, she told me this is what they did to her in the hospital. She was pregnant and she was suffering, and she came and she asked them, they asked her for insurance. She says that she doesn't have any insurance, and the insurance, who has to give it to them? It's the government. The government has to give them a social number, and this is with that they're going to have the insurance. Even though they have that, they cannot get the insurance. So what do you tell these people? And this is what kills them. Like, humiliation kills them. Everywhere they go, they knock on the door and nobody opens for them. And even in the international institutions, they don't stop that corruption that is happening against the community. So there are a lot of organizations that were like working to better the condition of these immigrants, of those Black immigrants in Mexico, just like Haitian Bridge Alliance, just like Al Otro Lado, and a lot of them are trying to see how they can work to make that happen. But the Black community, they suffered a lot with this Title 42, and a lot of them are in Haiti. They cannot go anywhere. They're suffering. Some of them, they have to prostitute themselves because they were deported because of Title 42, so they had to go to Haiti and they're living in misery. So it is a disaster for the Black community of immigrants.
Thank you thank you so much, John, for sharing with us what you've experienced and what you've heard others experience and seen regarding the effect and harm that Title 42 is causing all immigrant communities, but specifically the Black community. And with that, I would like to turn to Raquel, who can tell us what her experience was like being in Mexico and being subjected to Title 42. Raquel?
Raquel, if you unmute.
So thank you, John, for telling us that harrowing story and the experiences that not only you suffered, but that of others under Title 42. And with that, I would like to move to Raquel so she can tell us what her life was like being subjected to Title 42. Raquel?
Yeah, so I think she's gonna speak about Jamaica. You ready?
Yes, unfortunately, there's been some technical difficulty with us connecting with Raquel, so we will come back to her. So we are going to move on to hear from Maris from Border Butterflies Coalition, who is a managing attorney who will tell you about his experiences defending Black immigrants that are subjected to Title 42.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone who helped put this space together. So my name is I work for an organization. It's a coalitional project called Border Butterflies. I specifically work for Transgender Law Center, and we work to support LGBTQ migrants in Mexico and as they continue on to the United States. And specifically today, I want to just talk about as Title 42 came into effect in March of 2020, as COVID kind of started ramping up for all of us, which basically caused effectively an end to all processing of asylum claims in the United States, or into the United States. So what that meant was that from one day to the next, people were no longer able to enter the United States and ask for asylum. For us who work in specifically in Tijuana, although and also in other parts of the border, this caused the shelters to become overflow, already at capacity shelters became even more full to the point of capacity. People with medical conditions were unable to cross. And it created, exacerbated already existing issues of safety and mental health. For Black migrants, this was incredibly acute. Every single thing I just listed became really even more extreme. The effects of it were even more extreme for Black migrants. So shelters that were already not very welcoming often to Black migrants were worse, that people were turned away, people were kicked out. And what we found over time was that we had about 18 to 19 people we were supporting just in like hotels and Airbnbs, because they were unable to stay in shelters safely because of racism and because of bias issues. Many of them had medical issues. We had a number of clients who were HIV positive and spent, in some cases, over 9 months without receiving HIV care. For each of these people, we had people with really acute anemia who were just wasting away in front of us. And for each of these people, you think, well, surely there must be an exception. There must be some way to get them across. If someone knew about it, they would let them across. And I certainly started this journey in that mindset. Like, certainly, we just have to find someone in the Biden administration who knows that there are transgender, lesbian, gay, and bisexual migrants, Black migrants, don't speak Spanish, at incredibly high risk, don't have visas. Certainly, we just need to find the right person to talk to. As a lawyer, the one thing we have to do in this situation was to file basically a request to the United States government and say, here are the situation for these folks. Would you grant them a permission to enter the United States? Over the course of about 6 months, we filed over 50 parole requests to the United States government and held over 30 meetings with both local and like DC level administration officials. We were sent around in circles. Well, talk to DHS, well, talk to the Border Patrol, well, talk to the Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, and eventually realized we were going to get nowhere. There was nobody at the US government who was going to pick up the phone and care about the fact that there were Black, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender migrants stranded at the US-Mexico border without HIV medication, at risk. We had 4 clients get arrested because they were just walking down the street. They were arrested by the police, put in handcuffs, and taken to immigration detention. They were one of the unbelievably few lucky ones where we knew about it. They had made contact with us. We found a lawyer, and she spent 3 weeks to get them out of detention. We filed a parole request while they were in detention, and immediately after they were released, it was denied both times. People who had not received HIV medication for 9 months, we had letters from doctors saying this person is at serious risk of long-term effects without this medication. those parole requests were denied. One of the speakers you'll hear from a little later on, them and their partner were in Mexico, I think over 8 months. Their parole request was submitted 5 times and denied each time. Each time we would add a letter, a psychological letter showing the mental effects of just sitting, afraid to go outside, afraid to move, afraid to do anything. The parole request was denied. Added more evidence about medical conditions that were existing, the request was denied. So what we saw was blatant disregard and blatant just, neglect on the part of the US government with respect to all migrants, but particularly and acutely Black migrants at the border. Out of the 50 parole requests we filed, 3 were granted. One of those people was a Black Jamaican gay man. He was the only one of those 3 people who got a parole request granted, and he went to detention. So he got to wait in Mexico for 6 to 8 months. I can't remember exactly. He finally was out of these 50, one of the 3 that for no particular reason was granted, was no less or had no better or worse facts than anyone else. And he was sent to an immigration detention center, and it took us 6 months to get him released. So those were just, I'll stop there, but I just want to say that, for those of you sitting out there watching this thinking, well, this is really bad, but certainly there is someone to call. I've made those calls. And what we are seeing is a systemic, this is political, this is a policy decision, and it is directly affects and is just blatantly racist.
Thank you, MM, for shining a light on what advocates on the ground are really going through, trying to fight to get some type of relief for the most vulnerable that are subjected to Title 42, and what those challenges look like, and the blatant disregard for their lives and the lack of humanity that goes along with Title 42. I really appreciate your candor. And with that, I will move to Jean, who is currently in Mexico and has been subjected to Title 42, is currently subjected to Title 42. Jean?
Oui.
Yes, just to protect Jean and his family, because they are still in Mexico. We are not going to show his face, but you will hear his voice, and we hope you will hear his words of what he is currently going through in Mexico. Jean?
Oui, m'kapable konya?
Yes, I can speak now.
Okay. Sak pase, konen
What happened is
bagay racist la son bagay
racism is
anpil nou
something
ap sebi nan Meksik.
that a lot of Black people
Mwen
submitted
men
to
pake mwen sebi anpil
Mexico.
nan
What I've been going
bagay
through.
racist la. Se pepou, se pa imigrasyon, se pa chef.
It's not the immigration, it's
Parfois,
not
on
the
est
people on top.
machine,
It's
ouais, t'as
people.
processé même qui nous à la machine là, et puis ouais,
If you're Black and you're sitting in the car,
même dans la rue tout,
in the streets,
nous pas aller dans pays, nous va comprendre.
they tell us to go back to our country. We don't understand. Go back to your country.
On parle ça qui vérité ça moi même.
What I'm speaking the truth. It's my experience.
Tel bagay mon te fait.
If I don't live it, I won't report it. On top of that, there's a lot of, I have a lot of allergies, and whenever it gets really hot, and this is what's happening in Mexico. This discrimination is really difficult. I don't know if you guys have more questions that you want to ask me. That's why I'm here, and I'm waiting to see what can be done. If there's anything else you want to ask me.
Jean, can you shed some light on what life is like day to day with you and your family in Mexico while you wait for Title 42 to be removed as a barrier?
Mais ça m'attend, nous connaissons les en groupe, c'est un attend
I'm in a group right now and I'm waiting to see if they can call us to see if we can finally. There's a lot of people going through this, not just me. You know, you're not in your home. Everything they do to you, you just have to accept. You don't want to fight with the other people. And there's nowhere for us to complain. So I just want to know when I can leave. I just want to know when I'm going to be able to leave, because
can you provide us an example when you say that they mistreat you and you want to complain, but you have no one to complain to? Can you provide us with some examples of what you mean? What type of treatment are you and your family being subjected to while in Mexico?
What they do to us, when you go somewhere, it's only you that's black. They look at you in a strange way. If you walk down the street, it's not really the police for us in the street. You're just standing, and it's the public. They look at you funny. They don't even want to talk. You can't even go to the supermarket. They won't give you any service. They won't help you.
Thank you so much, John, for sharing with us what your life is currently like, you and your family in Mexico while being subjected to Title 42 and having to remain in Mexico. I want to turn it over now to Gabriela Munoz Cano, who is with Las Americas, who's currently working with John and his family, for her to talk about what it's like to be an advocate on the ground, assisting Black immigrants that are subjected to Title 42. Gabriela?
Hello, thank you everyone who is listening and who is participating in this important discussion. Well, as Nicole presented me, I'm Gabriela Munoz. I'm a project manager at Las Americas Immigrant Advocacy Center in El Paso, Texas, and Ciudad Juarez. You just heard from John and his family, his story of struggle and resistance against this immigration system that is designed to punish Black migrants such as John, that they're fleeing violence and they're fleeing from harm in their home country. Their story of race-based harassment and discrimination in Mexico is far from unique. Black migrants, are victimized, are also like the target for many of criminals in Mexico as well. And not only organized crime, also the state actors such as Mexican National Guards and local state police as well. Because of their visibility and their unfamiliarity with the local language, Haitian and Black migrants are easy targets. The race-based violence in the form of physical assault, extortion, gender-based violence, kidnapping, strips Black lives and their dignity and treats them as second-rate citizens. Police in Juarez and in other cities across Mexico do not protect Black migrants. They only push and enforce for this ongoing violence and discriminations against this particular population. We cannot forget that this occurs in Mexico, in a culture where we are blurring out our own Black history, slave resistance, and the formation of racial caste system. Mexico started to include Black population in their census in 2020, just a couple of years ago. Black migrants are particularly harmed in Mexico because of the severe lack of access to critical service and medical care. Because of the color of their skin and their otherness, shelters will turn Black migrants away, and they will charge them a high cost of rent to live in shelters and overcrowded shelters. Hospitals will refuse life-saving treatments or medical care, even to like Black pregnant women. This point is particularly important given the high number of injuries and medical conditions that Black migrants incur during their rough and long journey from their country of origin. They must pass and cross a lot of dangerous routes. For instance, the one that is in the Darien Gap in Panama. They travel hundreds of miles by foot, and they put themselves to further violence and severe malnutrition as well. So each day our office in Juarez receives hundreds of calls as well in our office in El Paso from Black asylum seekers who are stuck in Juarez under Title 42. The vast majority of them, like John right now, that he's here sitting next to me, has testified to have suffered ongoing racial discrimination and mistreatment in Mexico. As a local, as a Juarense, this is heartbreaking for me. That's why I'm here, and all of my colleagues as well are working really hard to like try to help as many as Black migrants as we can. A lot of them are living on the streets, in church basements. They're sick, they're dying. The hospitals refuse to provide them service, and employees will not hire them. Well, this is part of that journey that a lot of them have to endure in order to come to the border and being turned back to Mexico or to Haiti. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Gabriela, for really shining a bright light on what it is going on the ground in Mexico and what Black immigrants are facing and the discrimination that they're suffering solely based on the color of their skin and the lack of access to just basic necessities because of that, exacerbated by the fact that the United States is just on the other side and they cannot get in because of the color of their skin. With that, I would like to turn to Raquel so she may tell us about her journey. Raquel?
Hi, good afternoon. My partner and I were subjected to Title 42. We fled our home country, which is Jamaica, because our lives were threatened. We were almost killed. So we took our life savings and we just got up and tried to find a way to a better life. When arriving to Mexico, we thought that once we were there that we would be safe. That was actually not the case. When we arrived, we called numerous shelters, asking them if they had space. They told us no. We just, once we were at the airport, I told my partner that we should just go to a shelter. Maybe if they see us, they will take us in. When we got to the shelter, we saw that they had a lot of space. And we were kind of shocked and distraught because we heard that shelters in Mexico actually took in LGBT persons. That was a LGBT shelter as well, but they lied to us and told us that they didn't have space, which they did. Upon being in Mexico, we were in Mexico for almost 9 months. While being in Mexico, it was very stressful. It was a very horrible experience for us because some days we wanted to go back to Jamaica and we were like, it's better that it's better that we go back and just, forget about all of this, because it kind of looked like we were never going to reach to America to actually get the life that we actually wanted to live. Upon that, we actually got in contact with which was our guardian angel while we were in Mexico. Transgender Law Center, they took care of us. We were in a shelter for 4 months. Upon being in that shelter, we were still in contact with but they had a lot of persons that they were dealing with. So, that there were a lot of Jamaicans in Mexico at that time. Everyone was dealing with their own situation, and it wouldn't be fair to if they would just look at one particular set of people and not look at the other one. They were very great in actually making sure that everyone was good. While we were in the shelter, we experienced racism on a level that was kind of, it makes me emotional to talk about the experience that I had in Mexico, because it was kind of similar to the experience that I had in Jamaica. The only difference is that no one held a gun to me and my partner. We actually, in the shelter, if they were having meetings, they would not include us in the meetings or anything. They wouldn't let us know what's going on. The only persons that would make us know like what's going on is if he called us, and stuff like that. So we felt excluded from everything. We wouldn't want to go out because there were 2 incidents where we went out and we couldn't go into the store because they said that they didn't want us in there. And I was like, why? At first I thought it was the language barrier, but I noticed that it was the color of our skin, because when we went there, my partner wanted to go in to buy something, and I was going with her, and they told us, no, we can't come in. And then there were a group of people, white, another complexion. They came and they just let them in. And I was like, why don't you guys let us in just because of the color of our skin? There was another incident where we went to the laundromat and they didn't want to let us in because the lady was saying that she was saying lesbiana in Spanish. And I was like, why would she say that? And it was new to me, because I thought that being in Mexico, they would understand that, yeah, people come here, they're trying to go to America to get a better life, but it wasn't really, it was a horrible experience. Took care of us. She did her best. We were there for 8 months. We believed in her. There were other people that came and they told us that you guys shouldn't wait. You guys should go and do it the illegal way. But because we were in fear of our life, we didn't want to do that and then end up go back to Jamaica and get killed. So we waited and waited and waited until April 23rd. I remember this date. April 23rd, called us and told us that we got our date to go across, and I cried. I cried because at that point, everything that I was feeling, everything that we went through in Jamaica and in Mexico, it just felt like a burden was lifted. And upon actually stepping into America, I prayed and everything is not the best, but I thank God that we actually made it through with with God, and with everything. We kind of held together despite everything that we've been through.
Thank you so much, Raquel, for sharing your story. And thank you, for being that rock for her and her partner and for so many others in Mexico. With that, I would like to transition us. We've heard the stories, you've heard what's on the ground, you've heard the suffering, but let's talk about the policy. What it is, what it does, and what is happening with it in terms of trying to move it from policy to law. And for that, we're going to turn to Ronald Claude from the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, and also known as BAJI. Ronald, can you please explain T42 policy and where it is heading.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again for having me. And thank you again to our speakers before me and sharing their stories. I know that's not easy, so it's greatly appreciated. And, we, again, will hopefully try to continue to do the work we can in order to advocate with you all in order to see these policies come to an end. I think before getting into like the nuts and bolts of the situation, I think it would be clear to just juxtapose two images, right? And I think we have to start looking at, for example, the photo of President Biden holding a Ukrainian child in his arms and that welcoming image of "we'll help you in your time of need" versus the horseback and CBP officers with whips with Haitian migrants that are fleeing the same type of dangers from their own home country. And why I want to start with that imagery is just that, again, when folks are saying, well, how can we change this? What can be done? The thing is, the United States has the capacity and the creativity to figure how to do asylum, do it properly, and to allow folks that are, fleeing danger to come into the United States to claim asylum, seek asylum, you name it. And then when it comes to Black migrants, as we've heard from these stories, unfortunately, that same type of creativity and understanding and compassion and dignity is not shared. So just wanted to start with that imagery when we talk about the policies that are going into play. And then I think where we are right now with Title 42 is that, unfortunately, although the Biden administration earlier in May the end of April announced that they were going to plan to end Title 42 by May 23rd, because of some processes happening in the court. And I'll let folks, lawyers and stuff, explain that part in more detail. But because of that, Title 42 has not ended as it was planned to on May 23rd and is still operating fully at the border, inhibiting Black and brown migrants from seeking asylum in the United States. And because of what is happening in the court, we are also we're advocating against that, and we have lawyers that are doing their due diligence to try to battle it on that side. I guess where we can talk about now in terms of policy is what's happening on the congressional legislative side. And what we're seeing is that Republicans who have always been against or opposed to asylum are attempting in every little way to try to create legislation or include legislation in other priority bills like that would help the economy or, help folks with the gas prices or the baby formula shortage. What we're seeing is that they're trying to include legislation that would delay the end of Title 42, making it law and making it also then that much harder to have it removed. And they're doing so because, like I said, there's been that history of them being opposed to asylum. And what we're unfortunately also having to battle right now is that moderate Democrats have joined them in that fight. And I think why they have joined them is because of the midterms that is coming up. And they are afraid that because of the polls and the feeling on the ground being that Democrats aren't going to do quite well this upcoming midterms, they believe that if they're strong on immigration and strong at the border in terms of not letting folks in and quote unquote that narrative we always hear about in terms of the illegals, if they feel as if they come on strong on that, then perhaps that can help them in their elections and with other voting blocks. Now, I don't think that to be the case. I think the reason that they are feeling a sense of dread in terms of polls and stuff is because of their inability to fulfill some of the promises they had to us in 2020. And that goes from voting rights, another important issue to the Black diaspora, the George Floyd Justice Act. Or we can even look at the fact, again, on immigration, the promise that there would be a dignity and compassion towards immigration. And since Biden administration has been in office, it's been 2 years and we haven't seen any type of substantive immigration policy come forward yes, but also being able to successfully pass. So all of those unfulfilled promises, I think, have added up to folks being a little bit tired and unenthusiastic about these upcoming elections. And I think that's why you see certain Democrats trying to scramble right now, trying to figure out what they can do in order to uptick enthusiasm. But again, where it stands right now in terms of policies, long story short, is that there's Republicans and moderate Democrats right now that are working to try to make legislation that would delay the end of Title 42. And although we have some progressive members and allies that are, calling for a complete end of Title 42 and pushing for that, we need to hold up the momentum. And I think how we do that is, again, by elevating the stories of Raquel and others that shared of how just negatively impactful Title 42 is on their lives and their inability to seek asylum. And we can also hold this up by calling out more of our representatives across the country to speak up against Title 42, to ensure that it's not being voted on and attached to other bills that have nothing to do with immigration. And so I think those are two of the ways that we can try to continue to fight and push for an end of Title 42. But I think where we are right now is that it is held up in the courts. And I'll leave it to lawyers to explain a little more of the nuances on that side. And then on the legislative side, although there was an initial effort to end it, because of what happened in the courts, we're now seeing Republicans take advantage of trying to make it law that Title 42 stays in place and it continues. So that's where it is legislatively. And then I'll just wrap in terms of what I think is important to also take note of, again, on the impact, is that over 1.8 million migrants have been deported since the start of Title 42, and Black migrants out of all of these groups face the greatest risk of deportation. And on top of that, nearly 1 in 575 people living in Haiti today have been on a Biden administration expulsion or deportation plane within the past year. So Title 42 is its own epidemic, and we need to bring it to a halt and as soon as possible.
Thank you so much, Ronald, for that enlightening and inspiring presentation about what's going on in terms of asking not only our supporters, but to tell your friends and anyone who will listen to go to Congress and tell them not to continue or try to codify this horrible, inhumane policy that tries to strip immigrants of their dignity and their right to seek asylum. This concludes the presentation portion of this live stream. However, the chat is open for question and answer. So please feel free to use the chat to ask our panelists questions. We already have one question from the Texas Signal, and he asked, what's the latest number of Haitians that have been expelled? And what is exactly the process that happens after someone has been expelled in terms of asylum seeker? MM, would you like to take a shot at that?
Yeah, I can start us off. The number is, the last number that I saw was around 27,000, but I would note that there was an article recently published in the New York Times that says there were 4,000 folks on 36 flights in the last couple months. So I think the number we can assume is a little higher than 26,000. And I just want to add a couple quick things to that number because numbers are useful, but I think it's really important to remember that Title 42 is a public health law, and it was implemented by Stephen Miller, as many of us know. It was his idea. He had it in his pocket well before COVID, and COVID enabled them to basically close the border to asylum processing. And now what we are talking about is making this immigration policy. So what started as a health thing, there was no vaccine. We didn't have COVID testing. There were so many things we did not know in March of 2020 where maybe you could have argued this made some sense temporarily. We are now years into that. And we are now talking about codifying this as immigration policy. So should Title 42 stay or go? The question should be more like, do we need it to protect everyone who's crossing the border? And as a US citizen, and I go up and I cross the border a lot because I live right on the border in Tijuana, San Diego. No one has ever asked me for a COVID test. No one has ever asked me if I've been exposed to anyone with COVID. And so this is clearly not a health policy. So I raise that because we need to remember the difference between an expulsion and a deportation. An expulsion means you cross the border and you get flown back. You're returned within a couple days, a couple weeks. You're not given any kind of interview to see why you seek asylum. You're not asked if you would be in fear if you're returned. You are just placed on a flight. A lot of people are lied to and told they're being sent to Miami or somewhere else, and they wake up in Port-au-Prince, somewhere that many of them have not been in 6, 7, 8 years. They land in a country where there were 200 reported kidnappings in May, reported. Many areas of the city and country are controlled by gangs. The police and government is almost non-existent right now, which is why these expulsion flights are possible. 50%, according to the UN, of Haitians currently in Haiti do not have access. Not even do they have money or not. They do not have access to enough food to sustain an adult person. Again, many Haitians have not been in Haiti for years and years. Like, we could have a whole different webinar on the perilous, and I mean perilous and long and horrible journey that Haitians make it to get to the border. So someone spends 6, 7, 8 years traversing through South America, Central America, Mexico, you make it to the border, you cross, you are not given an interview, you are not given a process, you are not deported. You are basically told, I'm sorry, there's a pandemic, we're gonna send you back to Haiti and you're free to come back as soon as the pandemic's over, as though that, even is a rational thing to say to these folks. So, I know that was a little beyond your question, but I think that context is really important to that number. And the last thing I just want to say about this is that Haitians make up 6% of the people crossing the southern border and asking for asylum. They make up 60% of the people expelled. So that in and of itself speaks volumes about our care and concern for Black migrants, for Haitian folks, that we are sending them somewhere where we know it is incredibly dangerous. I would just say one tiny anecdote to kind of give those numbers some meat is that I'm in Tijuana, and over the past few months, I have watched, this was put in the chat earlier, in 1 month, 20,000 Ukrainians crossed the US-Mexico border. It was taking approximately 40 minutes to process those folks. And I was down at the border one day, and as I was watching a Haitian man just plead his case, like bullet wounds, and he'd been in Mexico for a couple of years, and Haitian and Ukrainians, and nothing against any Ukrainian who got this opportunity because they deserved it like everyone else. But this line was just going around this man just pleading for his family to be allowed into the United States, where he would have faced a 60% chance potentially of being expelled, a chance of going to detention, which, elevates his chances of being deported. But, this is a violation of human rights. It's a violation of our principles. Our country has not always done well, but I think it's more a question of who we want to be. And right now is really a moment where we need to think to ourselves, we are using a rule in a early 1900s statute to send people to their deaths with absolutely no protections, to make sure that we are not sending anyone to their death. And we need to stand up as a country, as a people, as advocates, and in whatever role you have to really speak out against this. So it's a little beyond the question of numbers, but I think some of that stuff is really important.
Thank you, MM, for that very thorough answer that did a lot more than just answer the question, but I think also dispelled a lot of myths and misunderstandings about what is going on with Title 42 and its adverse effect on Black immigrants, and specifically Haitians, in terms of not only the numbers, but the targeting. So I appreciate that. We have one more question that we've received from Facebook, and it says, if Biden hasn't followed the correct procedures to end Title 42, why hasn't he redone the steps? And I'm going to send that to Ronald. Ronald, why hasn't Biden redone the steps?
So thank you for the question. I'm not sure about redoing the steps, but I do know that the Department of Justice has indicated that they plan to appeal the court decision that is currently impeding them from ending Title 42. But in terms of what the timeline looks like, the speed of which they can do that, it's unknown. And quite frankly, I would push and say that unfortunately, it's not a priority for this administration. I think what we've been arguing and looking at is that from the beginning, and actually, quite frankly, since President Biden was on the campaign trail and had promised that he would bring an end to Title 42, we have been pushing for this, and it took almost halfway through his second year in office for him even to get close enough to do it. And then I think a lot of folks and legal experts and folks that have studied this way longer than me will even have told you that this outcome where we are now in terms of the court's decision was kind of expected. So for them to not even have had a plan to combat that, or the readiness to, tackle this in court and appeal it and, move along, hopefully, and to end this awful policy, is an indication of how much it's not a priority for them. And again, it's the anti-Blackness is the story of all of this. This is impacting particularly Black and brown migrants at the highest rate. And again, we look at it and juxtapose it. I have to use this imagery because when it comes to the Ukrainians and the situation that they were fleeing, and rightfully so, needed our help, we were able to figure something out. There was a whole program created, Unite Ukraine. So I think when you look at it that way, you have to ask, okay, so if we've moved away from COVID-19, like the government and the administration has pushed that we're past this pandemic, and as said, this has never been about health related policy. We could be providing everyone that shows up at the border masks, taking on social distancing protocols, provide vaccines, all of these types of things that would mitigate the risk of COVID-19 spreading further. We have a policy in place that is essentially acting as an immigration policy that keeps Black people from seeking and claiming asylum in the US on the books, and we don't see the urgency from the administration that this issue deserves in terms of getting rid of it. It's just not there. I'm not an expert in law, so I don't want to speak like, oh, well, they should do X, Y, Z. But what I will say is that there is no timeline. There is no sense of what is next from this administration when it comes to this. So it's really been left to advocates to push our congressional members to make sure that they don't do anything that would further codify Title 42. And I say that, I mean, make it into some type of law. So it's there in perpetuity or something like that. And then secondly, we have to make sure that we are continuing to push the administration to be like, hey, time is at the essence here. People are getting deported, that we are sending folks to their death. And, we need you to act faster and more appropriately on this issue. And I'll just end too on one more antidote in terms of the hypocrisy of all of this is that, as we know, there's been many Haitian migrants because of Title 42 that have been sent back to Haiti, right? And one of the things to highlight is that this United States government, the State Department in particular, has highlighted that for US citizens, Haiti is an unsafe place to travel. And so for us, we can recognize that what is happening in Haiti is not safe. We don't recommend travel there, but then we are sending planes by the day with thousands of people each day, or hundreds, back to that same country. So we can recognize for our own vantage point that it's unsafe, but yet we can't realize why people are trying to flee and trying to seek asylum elsewhere from there. So I'll just end there, but hopefully I answered your question in terms of we're not sure why he hasn't tried to appeal the court decision, but we're pushing him to try to do so, the Biden administration, that is.
Thank you so much, Ronald, for that answer. It looks like that's all the questions that we have received. And so again, I would like to thank all of the panelists, all the advocates who participated in this live stream. What we wanted for you all to take away from this, because again, like I said in the beginning, we have sounded the alarm about the policy being a health policy rooted in white supremacy, used to further and perpetuate white supremacy in immigration policy. We have given you detailed reports on all of the horrors that are happening in Mexico that are affecting Black and brown people, from murder to rape to kidnapping to human trafficking. You have seen the effect of Title 42 with the death of the 53 Central Americans trying to get over here to be of fear and live a regular life. You have heard and seen all of the Haitian, mostly men and women, that have drowned in the sea to try to get to Puerto Rico for freedom. Now you have heard from Black immigrants. They're telling you what they have experienced over and over again, trying to live freely and out of fear. Again, using Juneteenth and Pride Month as not only the backdrop, but the inspiration that we have to keep fighting, and we have to keep the struggle in mind and never give up. And with that, we need your help. We need you to reach out to Congress. We need you to say enough is enough. Enough is enough. We are better than this. We can do it. We have done it for other people. And we will do it for everyone equally. If you guys want to join the fight, Baji has a website. On their website, they have a place for you to engage, where you can work with them to engage Congress. There is the Black Migrant Power Fund to help Black immigration orgs with their work to try to help Black immigrants fight through all of the obstacles that have been laid in their way, to prevent them from what my ancestors on Juneteenth, and for all of the people that are LGBTQI identifying, to live the right to live freely and without fear. That should be considered a right given to all of us by God or whoever, or the universe, that is what we're all entitled to and should be allowed to achieve, regardless of politics, race, sexual orientation, religion. Everybody has the right to live freely and be free of fear. And we hope that this inspires you to join us in the fight to ensure that happens for everyone, and that no one is left behind or stranded anywhere, but allowed to seek asylum here in the United States, which is their right to do. And with that, I close out the live stream. Again, thank you so much for watching, listening, hopefully hearing, and joining us in the fight. I appreciate again all the speakers for telling us their truth and being willing to be vulnerable with us to inspire the fight. I appreciate you all. I hope you have a great day. And with that, we will end the live stream. Thank you.